let's take a look at your final project drafts. All right, I have the ones that I received in order. And we're going to start with Aidan's here. So Aidan, yours is a bit rougher than expected, but at least with the first page we have here, the first spread, I guess, it's a bit image heavy. So if you're going to do something like this, I might try maybe a different image here. I don't mind having like this first left side, this first page is like a title page. But if you wanted to have like a different image, maybe something that would go across like, you know, the top 2/3 maybe. And then you could have your article title down at the bottom, or even if you swapped them, if you had your article title at the top and then had your image down at the bottom, I'll undo that, and then your text flow to work around that. I think your navigation buttons are a little bit big. I might either knock those down. You can either do like next and like PREV instead of previous. But yeah, I would make these. I would make these a lot smaller. I'm trying to see, give or take, if I can resize. I'm not going to be able to resize the text. I mean, I can, but you know what I mean. So, you know, I might make them a lot smaller. And with the previous and next, you would just need it on like the previous here on this side, previous and next here, rather than previous next, because it's a magazine, and when you export these, they're gonna export as a spread, so they're gonna export like this. So you don't need a button to go back to this page from this page, or to and from these two pages. So you would just need really a button here. Let me get back to my. So you would just need a button here. Oops. There we go. So let's say like a button here and then a button here on each page. So once you set that up, this is where master pages might come in handy too, or parent pages. But once you set this up, you can kind of copy and then paste in place here your navigation buttons. Yeah, and your Rolling Stone doesn't need to be a full web address. It just needs to be, you know, you need to look in the assignment description, but the Rolling Stone and the publication date down at the bottom here, and that you can turn into your web link. So even going to, let me arrange my workspace here. I should have already there, but so under hyperlinks, you can select, like if you had, you know, your Rolling Stone and your publication date down at the bottom of each page, you could just highlight that and make that your hyperlink. We can work on that a little bit later. For buttons and forms, you can, like you said, you can make your buttons for sure. I would have them be a bit smaller. Or if you go to buttons and forms here and click this contextual menu, you could open up some sample buttons and things like that. So it has arrows that are already set for you as well. So you don't have to like program, because you'll effectively have to program these buttons, right? So if we select your button that you have going on, oh, you do have it. Okay, good. So you do have it on release or tap. Yeah, so you have that already set up. Yeah, I would just make those a little bit smaller. And then once you have, you know, your bottom of the page or your bottom of your spread set up, you can select everything at the bottom, copy, like this, for example. I'm just going to copy, hit Command C, make sure I'm on the next spread, and if I do a paste in place, so now your elements are in exactly the same spot. But yeah, I think a fair bit of work to do here, but I think as far as setting up your title page and then your article after that, flowing from one page to the next shouldn't be too much, but not a bad start. All right, moving on to DOMs here, and we'll scroll through just to show you. my heater cranks in the background, sorry. But yeah, so as far as this one, I like how you have it set up. I like how you have the Rolling Stone publication up here, and then you have some navigation buttons down here and your page numbers. You used your margins nice and effectively for that. I think a couple of minor things really. Yeah, your work overall is well done. I think the text flows pretty well around all of your images and throughout the article. Like, I think it reads well. I think the photos are set up well. My only sort of like minor thing would be, and you might take some tweaking and messing around with, but I would stylize this headline or title a little bit more. I like the title a lot. But I might give that like its separate space, maybe even have it in this like upper corner. I don't know if you want to take it across all 3 columns or have it be, across these 2 and relatively large, but you want it to be a title that will like pop out, right? You're going to have to format your text a little bit, which will be fine. So like I said, if we had this be a lot smaller, you'll see, if your article title took up, I'm just saying arbitrarily like this much space or even more, you'll see that now you'll have overset text here. So you might need to play with a few things, reformat some text frames. Like you could even go a little bit smaller with this picture if you wanted to. For pictures like this, you could crop. So if you wanted to crop this, and I'm hoping not to stretch. Yeah. So if you wanted to crop that, and then that will give you more room for the text there. And it gives you way more room. So you might not even have to go that far with it. Lastly, after you play with this, it's going to shift your text a little bit. As you can see, you have, this is sort of, you don't necessarily need to pay attention to like, each word per se, but for something like this where it has the like the lyrics here, and then it kind of has the rest of it here, I might try to format that, but you might not have to format it if you format this, down to your, let's say this is your title, so now you can see the text already pushed down, so now it's kind of like by itself-ish. You have this one line here a little bit. So again, like splitting the difference between give or take. Oh, yeah, there you go. So now it's just kind of, this is rough, but it's just kind of a little bit of tweaking to kind of get that and then get that together. You might want to take off hyphenation so you don't get these little orphans here. And that's just under paragraph. It should be under type and tables, under paragraph, and if you actually select, you should be able to, I don't know why we're not able to, oh there you go, you have to actually select the whole thing. So if you just do a select all and then uncheck hyphenate, whoa, what happened there? Well, that got really funky. I'm not sure why I did that, but we can work on that. I'm not sure why it freaked out and hyphenated absolutely everything, but again, playing around a little bit, you can even have a break if you wanted to force a paragraph break here to push that text down a little bit. We can work on these tweaks next week. But lastly, I was going to say, I like your pull quotes. I might play around with that a little bit graphically. Maybe even push it like over here, and then you would need to take the formatting. I wonder how we would do that. We'd have to play around, but I thought of if you turn this into a graphic, like outlining the text, so it doesn't push around this image, because you have the text wrapping around. There's ways we can have it not wrap around this. Yeah, of course it's not going to work that way, but I was thinking of if we had this be more of like a graphic. If I could do this quickly, create outlines on that. So now this is more just, it's, oops, not editable text. So I'm going to group that together, and then let's see if it's still, why is it not? Oh, I'm doing on my Illustrator. Why is it not letting me group? That's a little bit weird, but sure. Having all sorts of glitches here, and I'm not sure why. There we go. So let's see if it still pushes. Yeah, it still pushes that a little bit. We can work on this. But what I was thinking was kind of breaking this text so that it sort of formats over here, or turn it into a more graphic. I don't know if pushing it here, give or take, just to sort of separate it from that image a little bit. We might need to play around with sizing, or play around with where it actually, where I'm at 1,000 here today. Holy cow. Let me zoom in. Again, now I'm just kind of struggling here, but again, if you wanted to have it go across that a little bit, but just to kind of separate it a little bit, even if you can get it to where it kind of just breaks around, and you can play with your text formatting, your wrapping, so that it just goes across the top and the bottom, but just to kind of separate that that quote a little bit. Or if you're going to have it be that close to your your image here, just to kind of like stylize it a little bit more, just so it kind of like separates, for lack of a better word. But overall, I think that was a lot because of all the glitches, but my user glitches. But overall, I think super good start. I think if you had more of a title here, and you can use this title, I think it's a great title. Stylize that title in here, and then you'll have to reformat the text a little bit, but I think just kind of like playing with the text formatting, making sure that you don't get overset text at the bottom. You can kind of remember that last line. If that last line is there, then you're good. Maybe playing around with this pull quote a little bit, having it be a little bit more sort of stylized, if you choose to do that, would be great. But yeah, I think overall it looks really good, works really well. Nice work. Moving on to Ben's, I think this is an excellent start. It's laid out very well. The sort of aesthetics you have are a nice nod to Richard Prince and the type of work that he does. I like how you stylized your sort of headline there. And the sections work really well. Your positive negative space balance works really well. Again, with how it works with the images and the text, and then you have this sort of image heavy page on the next page, but you have the margins nicely laid out. Your page numbers and your navigation work really well. They're just like nice and subtle in there, so they're not too intrusive with the regular PDF or reading it, but the navigation buttons work well. Again, the current work and the legacy, how you have the sections marked out very well. My only sort of nitpicky-ish things with this, to be honest, would be maybe making these a little bit smaller, kind of keeping that that spacing in mind. Why am I blanking on the term? Proportionally, but maybe making these sections a little bit smaller, because you have this one and this one like fairly small. I know it's rather it's a lot of text to make that size, so I see like you're kind of splitting the difference there. So I don't think you need to make it this much smaller, but I think maybe somewhere in between this size and this size, I think. And what that might do is that will help with that like positive negative space. Like if you give this a little bit more negative space, I'm gonna move it like, obviously you don't want to do that. But if it was a little bit smaller, essentially stayed where it was, if this makes sense. Like kind of have it start in this general area, like where you had it, but just sizing it so that it kind of sits more away from the text. So you have this nice interplay between this positive negative space and design balance going here. And again, just a little bit smaller, just, and, you know, have it anchored, you know, in this top right corner, but have it, you know, a little bit smaller, again, kind of splitting the difference between this size and the current size you have it. To again, just kind of give it a little bit more breathing room. You have such a nice use of positive and negative space throughout your whole piece. I think that could be a tweak to, again, give these a little bit more breathing room and work with that positive and negative space. Lastly, it's not insignificant, but it shouldn't be a huge deal. Would be some sort of title. So what I might do is, depending on how you can pull something from, you know, inspired, pull something from the article. But you need some sort of title beyond just his name. So again, you know, formatting this area, if you wanted to have, you know, this a little bit smaller, kind of like the same, whatever size you end up making these. But if you make that a little bit smaller and kind of set it up, you know, give or take top, and then you could have your title going across here, and kind of play around with the same aesthetic that you have going on. Not so much like an overlap, but you can still kind of have, you know, if this was a bit smaller, and then you had your title maybe even this big or even a little bit smaller, you know, running in the negative space that you created by making this smaller. I think just having a title in there to format, and that way you wouldn't have to format your text as much if you needed to. You know, you can pull these down just a little bit. Hopefully these are threaded. They're not. So yeah, we'll work on threading the text, or at least threading these three. We should all be using threaded text, so that way if you do make any changes, I see why you didn't with this sort of setup. But what we can do is you can force breaks. So if you needed to, you know, if you have this text box threaded to this text box, you could still kind of do this effect. You would just need to force a column break here, which we can work on. But basically that's all in your special characters. So like, let's place our cursor for argument's sake. I'll show you really quickly. Let's say we want to put any kind of break here. You put your cursor where you want the break, and then we go into type and insert break character, and you'll see you have all sorts of, you have column breaks, frame breaks, page breaks, odd page breaks, even breaks, paragraph, all these good things. So if you wanted to do a column break, what that's going to do is it's going to push it to the next threaded column, which it's not threaded to anything, so it's not going to push, but it would theoretically, if it was threaded here, it would push it to this next column. Or even if you did, again, just going to these break characters, a frame break would basically do the same thing. It would push it to the next available frame. Page break pushes it to the next page. But even a paragraph return, that's going to push it. Well, it's probably going to push it into the overset text, but you get the idea. Where did I go? As I break your whole thing there. There we go. So yeah, you get the general idea. But yeah, you can still have all of this threaded throughout your document, which you really should. And just by setting up those breaks. So again, if this text box was threaded to this text box and you wanted that break to start there, yeah, you just do that. Force a column break and it pushes it to this frame. So that way, if you needed to, you know, for whatever reason, if you wanted to make this column a little bit smaller, then it would automatically adjust the text in this column. So that's why we would use threaded text. So yeah, just again, you know, sort of repeating myself, but some minor tweaks, and I think this one would be good to go. All right. Next, I believe Lauren, just to double check. Here we go. Again, I'll scroll through just to kind of show you overall. go. So I think a couple of things going on here. I think overall it's a decent start. We have a couple of images. I thought this one looks a little squished. That one's definitely a little bit squished. So you want to make sure that you're maintaining those proportions when you're resizing. Again, we're missing the headline there. Not a huge deal, but something that we could easily do to reformat. I'm going to see if your text is threaded as well. It doesn't seem like it, so we need to make sure that we thread our text. But overall, not bad. Visually, it looks pretty good. I think there's some reformatting needed and a couple of tweaks, and we would be good for revision. So first, we can reset it, but when we set it up, you want to make sure that you have 3 columns. You can certainly break that 3-column structure, but just to make sure that you're setting up your document with those 3 columns, you can certainly have your text boxes here. Your text boxes here go over those 3 columns, but we need to make sure that we're sticking with that 3-column structure. I think you're starting to get some interactivity there, which is really good. Yeah, you have them both there. And then we're missing the Rolling Stone publication info. And you can also put your hyperlink in that Rolling Stone thing. And then I want to see, we're missing our bookmarks, which are easy to do later. That's effectively just selecting something and making it a bookmark. Again, not really applicable for like a 6-page article, but I want to make sure that you guys know how to do it. So let's talk about the actual layout. I think overall you have a really strong concept, whatever you would call it. It's not the right word. You have a strong start is what I'm trying to say. So what I might do is I might, keep this logo, give or take here, and then you'll need your title somewhere. So if you got rid of 1 or 2 of these images, I see the sort of theme you're going for, but there's a lot of images that are like, they kind of do the same pose every time, so it's not really necessarily your fault there. But we have a lot of similar images, right? Like if you look really quickly, these 2 almost look like the same image. So there's a lot of like that sort of similar imaging. So I think if we got rid of some of them, even like maybe got rid of that one, and then you can move this one down here, and then that would give you room for your title. And then if you wanted to sort of reformat where these columns were, and then you can get into the article. I might have, if you wanted to, you could even swap photos, but if you wanted to use a photo that has a little bit of headroom, you can kind of crop around. So even if you wanted to have one photo go across the bottom here, and then have this photo at the top. Or I might mix it up and see if there was like a live photo with all of them or some of them in it to mix it up and put it in here. It's a lot of the same image, if you know what I mean. So yeah, but I think after reformatting your columns and then reformatting this area, give or take, depending on where you put your headline, you might need to move some things around, and that will also help. Will help the image and text flow. I think for this one, I like the idea of having this image go across the spine, which definitely happens. I think that having another logo might be a little bit repetitive. Again, we're kind of getting repetitive with the motifs, right? So we have a logo and then similar pictures, similar pictures of the singer here. Even if you wanted to have, one larger image in this area and have it go, even bigger across the spine, and then you could have your columns, your text flow down the left and then hit just about the other 3 columns here, and then kind of do it opposite. So you basically have, I'm going to try to do this very quickly just to kind of block it to show you. So let's say we had, sorry, I'm gonna like wreck your thing here. So let's say for argument's sake, we took a picture that was a little bit larger there. So if we had, and I keep doing Illustrator shortcuts, you know, so if you effectively, you could go a little bit smaller than that even. Trying to think, even if we cropped it, give or take there. And then if you had, let's say this is your text box, like that's a text frame. And then you could have another, depending on how the columns work. But if you wanted to even have, you know, text here, and then in a similar way, give or take, obviously a little bit better than that, like text there, you know, so you have one heavy, larger image and then a text sort of flowing around it, if that makes sense. Just to sort of break that up a bit and kind of sort of relay out the sort of repetitive images you have there. And then I think I like how you have it sort of ending with a collage. I might stylize that a little bit more. I like how you have the two, you know, the two pairs of images, kind of. So you have like sizing, not images, obviously, but the two different pairs of sizes. What I might do is I might go for like a color in the background or something. And then that's something that you can repeat as well. So if you had like color on this page or graphics on this page, and then you had graphics on this last page, just to kind of break up that, you know, I don't know, break up the space behind these four images. And then again, with this, formatting to 3 columns, so it's not, you know, large chunks of paragraphs. And then you might not need this last filler bit. I like the idea of doing that. But you may not need it after you reformat a little bit and reformat your text and your columns and then have those threaded to each other as well. Remember, we just hit the out port and then the text boxes of whichever boxes you want to thread to. So after reformatting the text into 3 columns, like you might be able to have like 1 column, 2 columns, 3 columns. And then I think that would help your text flow a little bit more. But I think just, you know, some playing around with your, no, well, not playing around, but restructuring your columns, I think is going to help sort of drive how you format some of the pictures and the text flow around the images. But I think just, you know, again, a good strong start and, you know, some, I'm repeating myself again, but some tweaks, some light-ish revisions, and I think you could knock this one out. All right, and then Sara. So we have to scroll through here. So we have, again, a little bit, you know, less than I would have liked to see, but we'll talk about what you have. So again, I don't mind this idea of having a large image for your start page. You want to make sure that when we're formatting these, I'm not sure, I would double check your sizing because I'm not sure you have your bleed set up properly. I always forget where it is, document setup. Oh yeah, you're also in picas, I believe. You want to make sure that you're in inches, so that could also be the problem. So I'm going to hit control. Yeah, you're in picas, so you want to make sure that you're in inches. So that's one of the other problems. So when we're setting up our files, we want to make sure that we're in the right units. So that's why the bleed looks funky. So you're going to have to reformat this following the guidelines. But I think I like the idea of having this, give or take, top area be your title area, depending on what you want to do with it. And then having a larger image. I would reformat this. You know, your frame is a little bit off. It looks a bit rough. You know, you have a lot more space here than here. So if you want this to go off the edge of the page, you just want to make sure that you reformat the picture so it does so. If you don't, you want to make sure that your visual margins, your negative space is even, and your picture isn't kind of like arbitrarily, you know, off, like he was way up at the top here. You know, you just want to make sure that you're formatting your image, like considering how the image looks, you know what I mean? Like you don't want to just have it like sort of arbitrarily down here. Now you're cutting off all of this action with the cowboy there. You want to make sure that his head isn't getting cut off, all that good stuff. But yeah, reformatting the picture so that your, let me go back to where he was. There we go. You know, formatting your picture so that it's even. And your page numbers, you know, it's a bit inconsistent. You don't have to have page. I would just have numbers. It's totally fine. Or if anything, PG for page. You don't need to spell out page. But I would do that consistently. You know, format. I know it's kind of tricky, but format your page numbers similarly so that, you know, you don't have this one spot where you don't have your navigation arrow. Because keep in mind, you do need a navigation arrow on this opening page because it's part of a larger publication, right? So there will be an article before this, in theory. So you do need a page, your navigation button here. But you do have some room to put them in the margins. You'll have a little bit more room, I believe, when it's set up properly. But you can still have your page number or even have your navigation arrow, give or take, in this area, and then have your page number here and then your publication info if you wanted to do that. And then again, once you get that set up on your first spread, you can copy all of that and then paste it in place here so you're not worrying about reformatting every single time. I think your buttons are a little bit big. And then I think if you make this, if you're making it yourself, you need to use your Pathfinder tool and make this one solid shape. Because if you make this a button by setting it up here, you know, you're just making part of that. Or again, if you wanted to use some preset buttons in buttons and forms, you can just hit sample buttons and forms, and they have arrows that kind of look like that. And you can just drag and drop. And then now you can resize those. And then now you have a button that's already set up. So you can kind of size it yourself rather than kind of like trying to reinvent the wheel there. And there's a variety of different types of buttons that they have. So yeah, so there's that for the first page. Depending on how you're going to format your text, again, with how you're cropping the images, I would be careful, especially with a piece like this, because you're cutting off most of the piece there. Or not most of your, but you're cutting off a lot of the piece there. So I would either choose a different piece if you wanted to have something that goes all the way to the edge. Either choose a different piece that you can crop, something that might have multiple pieces in it. Or if you were to use this image, I would just be mindful to only have it go to the bleed so that you're not cutting off, and then we can reformat. So that way you're not cutting off the image entirely. Yeah, so this you'll have to, so like that's the whole image. So you can certainly use an image like this, but again, if you were to go to the bleed, you know, you just want to make sure that you have enough frame. And then, yeah, your frame is here. So see, you're cutting off most of the photo. So I would choose a different photo maybe to use for that instead of cropping it. You know, you generally don't want to crop artwork or a singular piece, as I mentioned before. You generally don't, for a title, it's not too bad. But for featuring other images of work, you don't want to be cropping out all of his work. You know, there's, you know, if you wanted to use a shot like this, there's that one gallery shot that has a whole bunch of pieces with the car, potentially. I don't necessarily mind having one image go across 2 pages, and that's pretty much it. However, if you do choose to do that, you know, remember that you're going to be very limited with what you can do with text on this page and text on this page. So your formatting for your text is going to have to be pretty stylized and draw a lot of interest, rather than just having 3 columns of straight up text here and then 3 columns of straight up text there. Your text formatting is going to have to be pretty stylized and sort of visually even, so it's not just giant blocks of text to go along with this larger picture going across 2 pages. And then lastly, again, we talked about it all semester. You got to watch your formatting on your images. You're stretching this image, especially with artwork. You want to make sure that you're not stretching images. We need to pay attention to that. But yeah, I think a pretty good base. It's a little bit looser than I would have liked to see for a draft, but definitely some work to be done. But just again, make sure that all of your design decisions, we've talked about it all semester, all of your design decisions, you need to make sure that they look like they're deliberate, and your work, again, every creative choice is deliberate and not arbitrary, like where this kind of looks arbitrary because it's uneven. Draft doesn't mean sloppy. It means, slightly rough for some tweaks. But I think that, there's definitely stuff that can be done with this. I think you just need to sort of pay attention to those details, and then you could certainly bang out a great final project. All right. I like what I saw from everybody that I've seen. I think everybody has some pretty decent bases to work with. We have a couple more weeks to finish these out, and I'm looking forward to seeing what you guys do.